What's up guys? So today's video was meant to be sick. It was inspired by two of my favourite digital artists, Benny Productions and Phase Runner, and it was my first proper digital art piece. I was going to record it and show you guys my process, but I ran into a lot of issues. To give you some context, basically for a university project I was tasked to use Photoshop to create anything I want. So after about a year of wanting to create a digital art piece, I finally gave myself the opportunity and I threw together a digital scamp. If you don't know what a scamp is, it's basically a rough idea of what your final piece will look like, and I was very excited to create this final piece. So excited in fact, I decided I wanted to record it and share the process on YouTube. However, as soon as I began the piece, a creative's worst nightmare decided to strike. My laptop began to lag and become increasingly slow. Well, actually, I guess a worse nightmare is a laptop crashing without you saving your work. I'd actually argue that's worse, but even so, this became unbearably frustrating. So I decided to stop recording to speed up the processing power. This means unfortunately I only have the first 30 minutes of making this piece as footage, and the lag frustrated me so much I didn't even think to take process pictures, which is really annoying. With all that said, I'm not going to lie to you guys, this video kinda sucks. However, it is a proof of concept for a future series which I would love to explain at the end of the video. But for now, I'm going to try and keep this video short and sweet and show you a rough idea of the process I did. So, this is the end frame of the footage I got. If you're curious, the dimensions of my piece were A3 and I cut out all of the elements I wanted before starting. As you can see, I flipped the background images and changed the colour of the sky, though it's technically the sea. Both these choices were actually done much later, but since I'm going through layer by layer of the final Photoshop file, I can't really show you the full process unfortunately. Also, if you're wondering why the background elements are slightly blurry, it's because I used tilt-shift blur towards the end of the piece, but I had to rasterize the files first. This is a demonstration of me trying to darken all the layers and make them match slightly better. I did the same to the background and also added a small ruins element in the far background. I also blended the plane, which was probably my favourite bit because it was satisfying to see it merge in with the piece. I did the same with the foreground elements, of course, and if you don't know by the way, the foreground will always be darker than the furthest point in your piece, and the further the element in the background, the lighter it will be. So for example, your foreground will always be darker than your background, since your background is further away. Okay, never mind, this is actually my favourite bit I reckon. Constantly checking to see how the piece looked with this overlay kept me going and pushing through the times where I thought this piece wasn't looking good and I doubted myself. If you guys ever feel like that, take a step back, think how to move forward and maybe consider if it's worth restarting. In my Boba Fett helmet speed art video, that was a mouthful, I make a point that restarting is okay and may be worthwhile sometimes. Just know when to keep fighting and when to take one step back to go 2 steps forward. Here you can see me trying to fix some of the shadows. Basically, what I didn't clock onto was how the main element, these ruined pillars, in the original image had harsh light cast upon them. I realised a very strong light would have to be on the pillars, but there was no main source of light in this piece yet. So I created one. Originally I thought about a sinking car to be the source, but I changed this idea to a diver to save time. This was my attempt at colour matching. As you can clearly see, none of the colours really matched at all, and this really confused me when trying to blend elements. In hindsight, all I had to do was make each element a tint of blue, and that would have helped a lot, but at the time I didn't know what blue I was going to go with at the end piece, so I didn't do it. Here is the addition of the diver. She has a slight outer glow since at the very end I decided to add a slight glow on some of the elements so they would stand out from each other. I'm 90% certain Phase Runner does this on some of his pieces, but don't quote me on that. Not quite sure what his entire process is. Here I've now matched up the light to the floor. I've also added shadows from the pillars on the ground, though technically they would cast a harsher shadow similar to how I've done on the arch pillar here, which is annoying. This is the image so far with the overlay once again beginning to actually look kinda cool. And this was after adding a bit of blue to the background and adding another bit of blue to the torchlight so it matched a little bit better colour wise. So I guess I did do a little bit of colour matching then. This was after adding some fog to separate elements. Not sure if fog would actually work underwater now that I'm thinking of it, but I suppose the equivalent is like kicked up sand. If you look very closely, you can see here there are bubbles and fish I added. I added the fish towards the end since the right side felt slightly empty, and adding a group of fish swimming away from the ruins seemed to make sense to me. I found the whole piece was way too dark. I really wanted to brighten up the piece and make it look more appealing. I also added 2 rocks in the top half of the foreground since the top just felt a bit too empty, and I wanted to guide the viewer's eye a little more to the main subject in the centre of the piece. And then here, this is the final piece, with the main thing being a camera raw filter. That thing is like makeup. It can turn mediocre or even bad anything and make it glorious, I swear. But yeah, that's it. My number one problem is that the light is still way off. As I mentioned, the pillars would simply cause a much harsher shadow, but in any case, I'm pretty proud of it nonetheless. I just wish the video side of it could have run a lot smoother. But as mentioned, I see this as a proof of concept, which moves me on to my next point. I want to make more digital art, and preferably I could share this process with you guys on YouTube. But obviously my laptop isn't powerful enough to run a recording as I do a bit of digital art. So, if I take screenshots constantly as I develop my piece and tell you guys what I did, would you still be willing to see that? Please let me know, I'd really be happy to hear your guys' feedback. For now though, I apologise for the pretty mediocre video, and I hope you at least enjoyed the final piece, which you can see on Instagram by the way, at agosto_designs, shameless plug. But until next time, I'll see you guys later. Cheers.